Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a big stack of information, sort of sift through it all, and pull out the really important nuggets of knowledge and insight for you. Today we're diving into something humanity has been obsessed with for, well, millennia, the science of living longer.
It's a huge topic, really. It stretches all the way from ancient myths, some really desperate attempts at immortality, right up to the absolute cutting edge of biotechnology today. And our deep dive today draws heavily from excerpts from The Science of Living Longer by Gini Graham Scott, PhD. So we're going to unpack that historical quest for immortality, definitely explore the latest scientific advancements trying to combat aging, and then importantly reveal some surprisingly practical strategies, things you can actually apply, right now for potentially a longer, healthier life.
Okay, so we're covering a lot of ground then. Everything from emperors, what poisoning themselves, to what Silicon Valley billionaires are pouring money into, and even the simple everyday choices that can make a real difference. Let's jump right in. So this idea, this impulse to live forever, or at least, a lot longer, it's not new at all. People have been trying this for a very, very long time. And sometimes the methods were, well, pretty wild and often dangerous, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really fascinating historical journey. The source highlights this whole progression,
Yeah.
from myths like Icarus flying too close to the sun to actual and often pretty tragic human experiments. I mean, take Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. This is around 200 BCE. He actually poisoned himself taking mercury pills because he genuinely thought they'd grant eternal life.
Mercury. Wow.
Yeah. And then fast forward to 1492, Pope Innocent VIII.
Right.
He reportedly died after this desperate attempt at a blood transfusion from 3 healthy young boys. He was hoping to absorb their youth. Obviously, this was long before any understanding of blood types.
Right, a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And even in 1868, there was a Kentucky politician, Leonard Jones. He claimed he'd achieve immortality through prayer and fasting while running for U.S. presidency, no less. He died of pneumonia later that same year.
It's incredible, though. It seems like even before we were really writing things down, this deep-seated human desire for more than just one lifespan was there. What does that tell us?
Well, our sources suggest this desire is just deeply embedded in pretty much all cultures. Often it comes out through spiritual beliefs.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Neanderthals, their burial practices, the items they put in graves. It suggests some belief in a continued spiritual essence, right? And the whole concept of ghosts, spirits sticking around because of unfinished business. That's another really widespread expression of this same yearning. Or in Chinese tradition, honoring your ancestors is vital. It's partly to avoid their displeasure and, bad fortune. And then you had spiritualism becoming really popular in late 19th century America. All those seances were based on this idea of a non-physical immortality. Even the concept of metempsychosis or reincarnation, in Hinduism and other traditions. The soul moving from body to body, influenced by karma. It all speaks to this really profound longing for continuity.
And it's not just confined to history or spiritual beliefs, is it? This quest has fueled so much of our fiction, our stories, too.
Oh, definitely. From Ponce de Leon's, mythical search for the fountain of youth back in the 16th century, all the way to the sort of dark immortality we see in modern Gothic tales.
Right.
Think about the Twilight series or Vampire Diaries, The Walking Dead, all those zombie movies.
Right, yeah.
They all play on this desire for unending life, but often with a pretty terrifying twist. There's this underlying theme that these, quote, immortal dead beings could actually threaten all of humanity. It shows this kind of dual fascination and fear we have with the idea.
So, okay, we've always wanted to live longer, but for a lot of history, it was really more myth and misadventure than actual science. What's the science now telling us about why we age? And crucially, how we might be able to intervene?
Right. This gets to the fundamental question.
Yeah.
Why does the body essentially just wear out? Our source uses a good analogy. The body's like a machine,
Yeah.
and its parts inevitably wear out, just at different times. This leads to slowdowns, breakdowns. And scientists are focused on several core aging mechanisms. For instance, DNA mutations. Mistakes just accumulate as our cells divide over and over.
Little errors adding up?
Exactly. Then there's the buildup of waste products, things like damaged proteins, other cellular junk, basically, that accumulates inside and outside cells. Oxidation damage is another really big one. You have these reactive oxygen substances, free radicals, that damage critical parts of the cell membranes, DNA, enzymes, even the mitochondria.
The power sources of the cell, right?
Precisely. Damaging those is obviously not good.
And you hear a lot about something at the ends of our chromosomes, telomeres. How do they fit in?
Yes, telomere shortening. it plays a really critical role. Think of telomeres like the little plastic tips on your shoelaces. They protect the ends of the chromosomes, but they naturally get shorter each time a cell divides. And when they get too short, the chromosomes start to sort of fray, leading to errors in cell replication, and eventually the cell just stops dividing properly or dies. It ages.
Okay.
And finally, there's something called glycation. This is where glucose, sugar, basically binds with DNA or proteins or lipids. And that causes damage that's actually eerily similar to oxidative stress.
It's a stark thought, isn't it, when you realize that something like 85% of all deaths are reportedly due to aging itself. It affects almost every organ system. That number is just staggering.
It really is. And given this deeper understanding of how aging works, modern science is, well, aggressively exploring multiple avenues. And many of these are now backed by really substantial funding from major initiatives, influential figures. You've got SENS, for example, Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence, founded by Aubrey de Grey.
Right, I've heard of him.
Yeah, SENS aims to essentially cure 7 specific types of age-related cellular damage. The whole premise is about restoring the body at a molecular and cellular level. Then there's the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. They've been a leading cryonics organization since, 1972.
Freezing people.
Freezing heads or full bodies, yeah, with the incredibly ambitious goal of reviving them sometime in the future when the technology allows. And money is definitely flowing into this field. There was the Palo Alto Longevity Prize. A Silicon Valley physician, Jun Young, offered $1 million for scientists who could increase mouse lifespan by 50% or more.
Wow.
Driven by his belief that humans could maybe someday live 1,000 years.
1,000 years. That's a bold vision. What other big investments are happening?
Well, you also have major philanthropic players. The John Templeton Foundation funded the Immortality Project with a $5 million grant between 2012 and 2015. That supported 34 different research projects globally, trying to integrate science, philosophy, and theology on this topic.
Interesting mix.
Yeah. And then there's Alphabet, Google's parent company. They invested a massive $730 million in Calico. Calico partners with universities, pharmaceutical companies. They're looking for longevity-related gene markers in people who live to be over 100, centenarians, and also developing treatments for age-related diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
So huge players involved.
Absolutely. Plus, you have significant grants and anti-aging projects initiated by the Glenn Foundation and Larry Ellison's Ellison Medical Foundation, supporting work in places like Harvard, MIT, the Mayo Clinic. The resources being poured into this are truly substantial now.
It's remarkable, all that capital, all that scientific brain power focused on this challenge, and some of the specific techniques they're exploring. They really do sound like something straight out of science fiction, like cryonics, for instance, freezing people for the future.
Right. The sort of foundational text for modern cryonics was Robert Edinger's book back in 1962, The Prospect of Immortality. He basically asserted that future technology could revive frozen people. And it gained traction, got support from people like Isaac Asimov, became a bit of a global sensation, actually.
But freezing a whole human being? That can't be simple. There must be massive challenges, scientifically, practically.
Oh, huge challenges.
Yeah.
Not at all simple. The source details some really significant hurdles. You've got things like metabolic imbalance, severe thermal shock as temperatures plummet,
Yeah.
damage during the long-term storage, or even during thawing, if that ever happens. And then there's the issue of the cryopreserving chemicals themselves. They're needed to try and prevent ice crystals forming and shredding cells, but they're often highly toxic.
So it's a catch-22.
Somewhat, yeah. And early efforts also ran into very basic practical problems, like where do you even house these frozen bodies long-term? Capsule links were an issue, and just people stopping payments for the continued suspension, which sometimes led to bodies, well, thawing out.
Yikes. And there have been some pretty public controversies, too, haven't there? I remember hearing about a former Alcor employee, Larry Johnson. He raised serious doubts about the methods, right? Talking about potential brain damage from the extreme, cold, questionable practices. That led to big legal fights.
That's right. It highlighted the skepticism and the difficulties involved.
Okay, so beyond freezing, what about ideas that sound even more out there, like replacing or even transferring parts of ourselves?
Yeah, that's where you get into the really wild territory of head and brain transplants. There were plans floated, notably by an Italian surgeon, Sergio Canavero, that got a lot of media attention around 2016, 2017, about transplanting a human head onto a donor body.
Seriously, a whole head transplant.
That was the proposal. The procedure involved cooling the brain way down, attempting to fuse the spinal cord. But the risks are just immense. Paralysis, irreparable brain damage. While some limited success has been claimed in animal models, applying it to humans is still highly speculative. And the ethical and technical mountains to climb are enormous.
It really does sound like that old sci-fi trope, doesn't it? Like in Edgar Rice Burroughs' The Mastermind of Mars from 1928, where you had these old rich people buying young bodies just to stick their brains into. It definitely makes you think about the barriers and the ethics.
It does. And the fundamental biological barrier, really, to successful brain or head transplants remains nerve tissue scarring. Nerves just don't heal well that way, especially the spinal cord. But, there are always little glimmers of hope. Research with specific strains of mice, like MRL mice, which have amazing healing abilities. And there was even a partial brain transplant study in mice by Dr. Dorothy Krieger back in 1982. These offer, let's say, tantalizing hints for the future, but we are a very, very long way off.
Okay, so maybe physical transplants are far-fetched for now. What about going digital?
Yes. Digital immortality. That's another fascinating, maybe even more abstract concept. People like Ray Kurzweil, for instance, envision this future where non-biological systems, AI, nanotech, gradually integrate more and more into our bodies and brains. And eventually, the idea is we could move our entire consciousness, our thinking, into the cloud.
Like uploading your mind.
Essentially, yes, the thinking goes.
Yeah.
If your data, your consciousness is immaterial, that it could potentially be immortal, transferable across different physical computer drives or systems.
So like a digital ghost in the machine that lives forever.
Pretty much. And this isn't just pure fantasy talk. Intel was working on something called an exascale computer, aiming to operate at human brain speed by 2018. And back in 2013, Japanese and German researchers managed to simulate about 1% of brain activity for just 1 second using supercomputers.
Still a tiny fraction, but shows the direction.
Exactly. And there's Dmitry Itskov, a Russian internet millionaire. He actually believes this kind of digital immortality could be achievable by 2045. He's funding research into things like mind-controlled robots and studies looking at brain activity even after clinical death. It's a truly bold vision, sort of disentangling consciousness from biology itself.
Okay, wow. Let's maybe bring it back down to our biology for a minute. What about advances with our actual cells or even our blood? Those seem a bit more tangible than digital consciousness.
Absolutely. And there's been really significant progress there, especially with stem cell research. Work at places like the Salk Institute, for example, shows real promise using gene editing with stem cells derived from developing embryos. The potential there is for replacing degenerated body parts eventually.
Regenerative medicine.
Exactly. And the McKnight Brain Institute did work where they introduced immature neural stem cells into the brain, and these cells actually matured into adult brain cells. That suggests potential future cures for devastating conditions like Parkinson's and Huntington's disease.
And I think I read something about using umbilical cord blood, too.
Yes, that's another promising area. The University of South Florida used stem cells from human umbilical cord blood in rats that had suffered heart attacks. And it significantly reduced the damage, helping their hearts pump almost normally again. There was also that groundbreaking, though later controversial work by Dr. Woo-Suk Hwang in South Korea. He created embryonic stem cells tailored from patients with specific diseases, showing the potential for really targeted therapies.
Now, this next one, it always sounds a bit vampiric to me, but apparently this idea of using younger blood to reverse aging parabiosis, I think it's called, it's actually quite an old idea.
It is surprisingly old, and the history is pretty dramatic. Early attempts back in the 17th century by people like Andreas Libavius and the Royal Society in London, they tried transfusing animal blood into humans or young human blood into older people. It was understandably deadly because they had zero knowledge of blood groups or immune reactions.
Right.
But modern research eventually revived the concept in a more controlled way. Clive Mackay, back in 1956, surgically linked the bloodstreams of young and old mice, parabiosis, and he observed that the older mice did indeed seem to become healthier, more youthful.
So something in the young blood was helping. Did they figure out what it was?
That's where it got really exciting. In 2004, Amy Wagers at Harvard made a huge breakthrough. She and her team identified a specific protein called GDF11. It was abundant in the blood of young mice, but very rare in older ones.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. When they injected just this GDF11 protein into older mice, it dramatically reversed many signs of aging. It seemed to reactivate stem cells, leading to healthier, younger tissues in the heart, brain, muscles.
Wow. So what does that mean for humans? Could we actually get, like, transfusions of young blood components to live longer?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, or maybe billion-dollar question. Researchers like Tony Westcore and Caroline Nikolic founded a company called Alkahest in 2014. Their goal was precisely to test fractions of human plasma, the liquid part of blood from young donors in mice, looking for increased brain function. And they had plans for human trials, particularly for Alzheimer's patients.
But
But it immediately raises a huge ethical question, doesn't it? If this approach actually works, the world's supply of plasma, especially from young, healthy donors, is finite. Who gets access? A very real concern that, initially at least, it would likely be the wealthy who could afford such treatments, creating a big potential divide.
yeah, that's a serious ethical consideration.
Definitely. And looping into those aging mechanisms we talked about. Remember the telomeres? Those protective caps on our chromosomes?
Right, the ones that shorten with age.
Exactly. There's an enzyme called telomerase that normally keeps them healthy and long, especially when we're young, but its levels drop off significantly as we age.
And when the chromosomes fray because the telomeres are too short, that causes physical decline.
Right. That's the idea. And there was this really dramatic Harvard study published in 2011 by Ronald DePino's group. They genetically engineered mice so they could basically turn the telomerase enzyme on and off like a switch. When they turned telomerase off, these mice aged incredibly rapidly. They showed all the classic signs: shrunken brains, poor cognition, hair loss, infertility.
Wow, accelerated aging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the really stunning part. When they turned the telomerase back on in these prematurely aged mice, the mice actually became young again. They showed a reversal of many of these aging effects. Their organs regenerated, cognitive function improved. It was quite similar in impact to the GDF-11 results.
That's incredible. It suggests there might be these master switches for aging that could potentially be flipped back.
It certainly hints at that possibility, yeah.
Yeah.
A powerful, maybe reversible switch for at least some key aspects of aging.
It's just fascinating how we're exploring these incredibly dramatic, almost futuristic interventions. But then at the same time, you walk into any health store or pharmacy, and there's this massive growing market for everyday anti-aging products. Creams, pills, how does all that fit into the scientific picture?
Yeah, it's a huge billion-dollar industry globally. The source definitely mentions this proliferation of products. You see things claiming to provide missing stem cells or specific molecules or enzymes. Longevity creams, capsules, pills. But it's really crucial to understand that a lot of the underlying research for many commercial products is still very preliminary. Often the findings are primarily in, say, worms or flies or mice.
Not humans.
Not rigorously tested in large human trials, no. And in humans, it's notoriously difficult to separate a genuine biological effect from the placebo effect for many of these over-the-counter type products. Doesn't mean none of them work, but caution is definitely needed.
It's so easy to get caught up in the really exciting, almost sci-fi aspects of longevity research, thinking about freezing people or uploading minds. But what does all this deep science actually imply for the simple daily choices we can make right now? Things that could genuinely contribute to a longer, healthier life without needing, a futuristic lab.
That's maybe the most empowering part of this whole deep dive, actually.
Sure.
Our source dedicates a lot of attention to lifestyle and psychological factors. It provides really actionable advice that doesn't require a Silicon Valley billionaire's budget or, signing up for cryonics.
Okay, good. So let's start with probably the biggest one, diet and nutrition. It seems it's not just about eating less, is it? It's more about eating smarter.
Precisely. That's the key message. The core advice generally boils down to avoiding simple sugars and refined starches, the white bread, pasta, sugary drinks, and instead emphasizing healthy fats, things like fish oil, omega-3s, nuts, seeds, olive oil. Even well-known figures in the field, like Ray Kurzweil and Terry Grossman, they recommend specific substances too, like metformin, a diabetes drug showing anti-aging potential, and resveratrol, which is famously found in red wine.
Right.
But what's really insightful from some sources, like the book Immortality by Wallach and Lon, isn't just what you cut out, but what you prioritize. They looked at centenarians, people living over 100 in certain cultures, and they often found these individuals consumed calorie-restricted diets, maybe 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day. Quite low, relatively low, yes. And crucially, diets rich in antioxidants from sources like coffee, green tea, dark chocolate, wine, lots of fruits and vegetables. And interestingly, they also noted these populations often got a wide range of minerals from traditional sources, things we don't get anymore, like wood ash used in cooking or nutrient-rich flood silt in their soil.
Ah, so minerals we might be missing now due to modern farming.
That's the suggestion. So they propose modern humans might benefit from a calorie-restricted diet supplemented with plant-derived minerals to ensure we get those essential cofactors needed for our bodies to actually use the nutrients we eat.
That makes sense. Ensuring absorption, not just intake.
Exactly. Other recommendations you see, for instance, from Robert Kekich, echo some of this. Maybe emphasizing high-quality animal protein, fewer easily digestible carbs from fruits and vegetables, high fiber, ensuring a good balance of healthy fats like omega-3s and omega-6s, aiming for high potassium and lower sodium, maybe lower alkaline content in the diet, and generally getting plenty of those beneficial phytochemicals, vitamins, and antioxidants from plant sources. The big goal here is really to avoid obesity and type 2 diabetes, which are unfortunately so strongly linked to the typical unhealthy Western diet.
Okay, and tied into diet, what about supplements? That's that billion-dollar industry you mentioned. Are they necessary?
Well, the source points out the argument for them. The premise is basically that with modern food production, depleted soils, the natural aging process itself, and maybe even some genetic variations people have, most individuals simply don't get optimal amounts of all essential vitamins and minerals from their food alone.
And proponents point to thousands of studies suggesting benefits, right? More energy, fewer
Yes,
illnesses.
there's a large body of research, though interpretation can be complex. But the underlying idea is supplementation might help fill those nutritional gaps.
Okay, moving from what we put in our bodies to how we move them. Exercise. What's the longevity prescription there?
The consensus seems to be a combination approach is best. You want both weight training or resistance training and cardiovascular exercise. For weight training, the recommendation is usually hitting all the major muscle groups at least twice a week, and importantly, gradually increasing the weight or resistance as you get stronger. Progressive overload. And then for cardio, you want aerobic activities that get your heart rate up. Things like running, brisk walking, swimming, biking. Ideally, aiming for some form of this kind of exercise, maybe 6 or even 7 days a week, for sessions lasting around 20 to 45 minutes.
And the benefits aren't just physical strength or heart health, are they? Exercise is huge for the brain, too.
Absolutely critical for the brain. It strengthens the connections between neurons, increases blood flow carrying oxygen and nutrients. It's really vital for cognitive function as we age. And on that note, it's just as important to consciously exercise your brain, too. Keep learning new things, tackle challenging problems, read widely, play strategic games like chess or bridge. Keep it active.
Okay, so diet, supplements, exercise. What other core health habits does the source emphasize for longevity?
Several key ones. Avoiding smoking is just paramount. The statistics are stark. Male smokers live on average 13.2 years less than non-smokers. For females, it's 14.5 years less. Overall mortality is about 3 times higher. It's just devastating for health span and lifespan.
A massive impact.
Huge. Also, being mindful of sun exposure. Some sun is good for vitamin D, but excessive exposure, especially during peak hours, roughly 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., increases skin cancer risk and accelerates skin aging.
So using sunscreen if you're going to be out for more than, say, 20 minutes is wise.
And sleep. We hear so much about sleep now.
Crucial. Getting good quality sleep, typically around 7 to 8 hours for most adults, is absolutely fundamental. Sleep deprivation isn't just about feeling tired. It triggers inflammation throughout the body, it impairs cognitive function, affects mood, and chronically it contributes significantly to serious diseases like diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. It's when your body does vital repair work.
Can't skimp on sleep. What else? Something often overlooked, but really important according to the source. Oral health. Conditions like periodontitis, gum disease, which is incredibly common, affecting maybe 75% of U.S. adults to some degree, isn't just a mouth problem. It's linked to increased risk for a whole host of other serious conditions. Diabetes, respiratory diseases, obesity, osteoporosis, and especially cardiovascular diseases. The mouth is really a window into your systemic health.
Wow, I didn't realize the connection was that strong.
It's significant. Finally, the source talks about reducing exposure to environmental toxins. This includes things like toxic heavy metals, mercury from some fish, aluminum, lead. Practical strategies include eating a healthy diet, which helps detoxification, getting regular exercise, sweating helps excrete some toxins, and especially drinking plenty of clean water. Filtered water is generally preferred over potentially contaminated tap water or sugary soft drinks and energy drinks which can contain unwanted chemicals or pathogens.
So simple everyday things can help there, like using natural cleaning products instead of harsh chemicals, botanical pest control, air filters.
Exactly. Having plenty of houseplants can help purify indoor air too. Definitely avoiding smoking inside the house, which pollutes the air significantly.
Okay.
It also means being aware of potential hazards at home or work, using proper safety gear if you handle solvents or pesticides, for example. And while it's almost impossible to avoid completely in modern life, it's probably wise to limit unnecessary exposure to electromagnetic radiation from all our various electronic devices. The science is still evolving, but minimizing exposure where feasible seems prudent.
Okay, so we've covered the physical body, the environment,
Hmm.
but beyond that, the source really delves into the psychological side of things, the mind-body connection. It really seems like your attitude, your mindset. It's not just a nice to have, but a massive component of living longer, isn't it?
It seems profoundly important, yes. The source emphasizes that a positive, optimistic outlook, learning effective ways to relax, and actively managing stress. These things are all deeply interconnected and absolutely crucial for a long, healthy life.
We hear about the mind-body connection a lot, but how solid is the evidence? Are there actual studies showing that, say, optimism impacts lifespan or physical health?
Oh, yes, there's some pretty compelling research. For example, one Harvard study followed over 1,300 men for years. They found that the men identified as optimists had almost half the risk of developing coronary heart problems compared to the men identified as pessimists.
Half the risk. That's significant.
It is. And the Mayo Clinic also conducted research finding that optimists generally reported fewer physical health problems, had more energy, and just felt happier overall. So it's showing up in multiple large studies.
It makes you think of those incredible examples, doesn't it? Like Stephen Hawking defying his ALS diagnosis for decades, driven by his will to contribute to science. Or someone like Nick Vujicic, born without arms or legs, who became this incredibly successful motivational speaker largely due to his profoundly positive attitude. They seem to embody this power.
They absolutely do. These individuals are powerful examples of the importance of having a strong sense of purpose in life. That purpose gives you direction, it gives meaning, it fuels determination. And conversely, losing that sense of purpose can have a really profound negative impact on health and longevity.
So if we want to tap into this power, what does that mean for us practically? How do we cultivate that kind of beneficial mindset?
Well, the suggestion is to actively work on it. It means consciously focusing on your strengths, not just your weaknesses. Visualizing achieving your goals. Trying to frame bad experiences as opportunities for learning and growth. Practicing forgiveness, both for yourself and for others. Holding on to resentment is stressful. And even using techniques like visualization for healing, or even visualizing yourself aging slowly and healthily. The idea is this approach helps harness your unconscious mind to support your conscious intentions for health and long life.
Interesting. Okay, and the other big psychological factor you mentioned was stress.
Yes, stress management is critical. And it's important to make a distinction here, as the source does. There's beneficial stress, sometimes called eustress. That's the kind of stress that motivates you, gives you energy to meet a challenge or achieve a goal. That can be good.
Right, like deadline pressure that gets you focused.
Exactly. But then there's harmful distress.
Yeah.
That's the chronic negative stress that leaves you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, upset, or angry for prolonged periods. That's the type we need to manage.
And that harmful distress, it doesn't just feel bad, it can literally shorten your life, right? What's the mechanism? How does it do that?
The effects are quite significant biologically. Chronic stress has been shown to literally shorten your telomeres, those protective chromosome caps again. Some studies found that highly stressed individuals can have telomeres almost 50% shorter than low-stress individuals, which might represent something like a 9 to 17-year difference in biological age.
Wow, 9 to 17 years just from stress.
That's what some studies suggest in terms of telomere length, a marker of biological age. Chronic stress also significantly weakens the immune system, making you more vulnerable to infections and potentially cancer. It disrupts digestion, raises blood pressure, and is a major contributor to heart disease, stroke, and even Alzheimer's disease. In fact, one estimate suggests that a staggering 80% of all doctor visits in the U.S. might be related to stress-induced conditions.
80%. That's unbelievable. So given how damaging this chronic distress is and how common it seems to be, what are the most effective strategies the source recommends for combating it?
Well, it comes back to a combination of things. Actively prioritizing and maintaining a healthy work-life balance is huge. Learning to say no, setting boundaries. Fostering good, supportive relationships is also key. Having people to talk to, confide in, that's a major buffer against stress. Adhering to a healthy diet and getting regular exercise, as we already discussed, also significantly helps your body cope with stress. And consciously taking breaks, stepping away, relaxing. Kurzweil and Grossman, in their work, particularly highlight something called the relaxation response. This was developed by Dr. Herbert Benson at Harvard. It involves using practices like meditation, yoga, tai chi, visualization, deep breathing exercises, biofeedback, techniques designed to deliberately counteract the physiological effects of the stress response.
So actively training your body to relax.
Exactly. The key is making these practices regular habits and also actively working to avoid chronic negative emotional responses like excessive anger, hostility, cynicism. These negative states tend to keep your body stuck in that fight or flight mode constantly, which just wears it down over time.
Okay. So we've really covered a vast landscape here. We've gone from humanity's, ancient, sometimes misguided aspirations for eternal life, all the way to the absolute cutting edge of scientific breakthroughs happening in labs right now, and then explored the really immense power of our simple daily choices and even the state of our own minds, this whole deep dive into living longer. It really reveals a truly multifaceted approach, doesn't it? It's not just one thing.
It truly does. That's perhaps the biggest takeaway. What's so profound, I think, is the sheer breadth of the human effort that's being poured into this quest. You've got these grand, ambitious scientific endeavors pushing the boundaries of biology. But alongside that, you have the quiet, cumulative, but incredibly significant power of everyday habits and mindset. It really suggests that while the ultimate magic bullet or hack for true immortality, if it's even possible, might still be decades away, we actually have a pretty significant toolkit at our disposal right now to profoundly enhance our health span, the years we live healthily, and likely extend our overall lifespan too.
And maybe that's the real core insight here. It's not about finding that single magic bullet. It's more like conducting a symphony, right?
Yeah.
A whole lot of different factors,
Yeah.
biological, environmental, psychological, lifestyle, all needing to work together in harmony.
That's a great way to put it. And thinking about that potential future. This raises a really important, almost philosophical question for all of us to consider, doesn't it? If we, as individuals, and maybe as a society, become increasingly successful at adopting these varied strategies, if we do significantly extend our healthy lifespans, what happens when a much larger portion of the population routinely lives healthily for, say, a century or even longer? What new societal challenges and opportunities might arise? How might our fundamental perceptions of things like career paths, family structures, retirement, how might all that transform the world where old age keeps getting pushed back and redefined?
That is definitely something to really chew on as you go about your day. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.